I think I've always known that I wanted to be a writer. That took the form for me of being in the journalism school here and always writing for newspapers. And then after a while, it just turned into writing my life. Writing from a... I love to do interviews and I love to do columns, but I also like to do reflection kinds of things. We used to laugh on, when Kurt Donaldson and I were both writing a column for the Star, that I was writing the inner stuff and Kurt was writing the outer stuff. So I have been writing for a long time, but the kind of writer I wanted to be started with working nights for the Scottsbluff Star-Herald, and so journalism has always been a great love. My roots are very, very deep in Nebraska, and I think they always will be, although I have kids on both coasts and in Montreal. But, you know, I live here in this plain, flat place where we all know each other. Life is pretty easy here. I mean, life is easy for me. I've been very blessed. But life is easier here. It takes you 10 minutes to do an errand. In Lincoln, where it takes you an hour and a half, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I feel, you know, I feel rooted in Nebraska because I've almost always lived here, but because I'm married to Charlie Thone, who's a deeply rooted person. And I think had I not joined up with him 45 years ago, I might have just flown right off the face of the earth. Because there was a time when I didn't value place as much as I do now. Although looking back over a lot of the things I've written, place takes a lot of the shape of things. I have no idea whether what I write about, the personal issues that I write about, are affected by a sense of place or not. All I know is that I'm lucky enough to have this be my place. And when I stay here and pay attention, then my life works. Who are the writers I love and whose words have been powerful for me, I go absolutely blank. May Sarton is one of the people I have always loved. You know, I adore Bill Clefcorn's poetry. I read so much that I forget a great deal of it. I just read constantly, both magazines and books. And so it's a little hard for me to pull out one person that I love or that's been an influence. I suppose a lot of the Nebraska writers have been influences. Some of the people who, and I don't do this, but some of the people who are the good nature writers, I mean, Lauren Isley words make me cry. You know, to read his autobiography is a numinous experience. Lauren put things beautifully, but I think he was sad. And he didn't make up any happy endings, and he didn't have any traditional religious stance at all, and he had more questions than he had answers. That's probably some of what I love about Lauren Isley. I have a friend who has made real clear to me recently what it is I write about. You'd think I'd know at this point. I did Women and Aging, Celebrating Ourselves, as I came through my own early aging process. You know, it starts just whenever it starts for people. I'm 66 now, and I have just, my new book just came out, which is about women, weight, and appearance issues. And I started just this week 2 new projects. I'm just so greedy I can't ever stay with one at a time. But a friend suggested to me, since I am currently somewhat obsessed with death and dying, that I write about it. So not only did I start writing about it, but I went back through, my office is just a mess of manuscripts. And I went back through, not all the way back through, but about that much, pulled out all the stuff in which I was talking about aging and death and dying and loss. And I have been writing about it for a very long time, and voila, somebody gave me a subject that pulls it all together. I'm really so thrilled, because I thought that stuff was just going to be there until my kids had to burn it. And then the other thing that I started doing, and this is an idea I had last spring, today is my oldest daughter's 40th birthday, so it was a perfect way to start writing a book about being a mother, which I hope ends up being just wildly irreverent. It will not, win the American Mother of the Year award. So I write about what I'm going through usually, is kind of the theme.
Good evening. Welcome to the Heritage Room. My name is Vicki Clark. I'm the curator here, and I'd like to welcome you all tonight. For those of you who might be new to the Heritage Room, I'd like to mention what we are here. It's a collection of works by and about Nebraska authors, and we have over 3,000 authors represented here, and that is also 10,000 works, which is just pretty amazing to have here tonight. So we're here to celebrate Nebraska authors and authorship, and that's what the John H. Ames Reading Series is about. The Heritage Room and its services is supported by an endowment fund which was established through the Nebraska Literary Heritage Association. And if it weren't for this endowment fund, we wouldn't be able to be here tonight. So we're very thankful for them to have supported us this way. And I'd encourage you all to come back during our public service hours and please visit us, and we'd love to show you some more of the treasures that we have here in our collection. But tonight I'd like to introduce Ruth Thone, who may need no introduction to many of you here tonight. But she's known in our community as the former First Lady of the State, an activist, a teacher, and a writer, which is one of the main reasons she's here tonight. In the preface of her most recent book, Ruth quotes May Sarton from her book entitled At 70 as saying, "I have never written a book that was not born out of a question I needed to answer for myself. Art is order, but it is made out of the chaos of life," which is a wonderful quote. And Ruth also writes out of a need to answer her own personal questions, which has culminated in at least 3 books so far. 2 of them are entitled Women in Aging, Celebrating Ourselves. A second one, Being Home, a collection of essays about the simple joys of family, nature, life beyond the big city, and the sacredness of the ordinary. And her third book, Fat, a Fate Worse Than Death, Women, Weight, and Appearance, which she's going to explore with us tonight. So we're all looking forward to that, and let's welcome Ruth Thone.
Thank you, Vicki. That was nice. We are grateful to the Ames series, aren't we, for having this. I told Vicki when I was picking out some chapters out of this new book to read from tonight, I realized that it was more outrageous than I thought it was. Somebody asked me about a year ago what the thrust of the book was, and I said rage. I love the cover because that's the Venus of Willendorf goddess statue, or a computer rendition of it. She's the oldest living fertility symbol, I think, that was been discovered about 40,000 years ago near Willendorf, Austria. And I just love her because she's got this great big fat belly that nobody ever told her to hold in. I also said that I insisted that we call the book Fat, A Fate Worse Than Death, but now I'm not so sure about that because it's a very hard book for somebody to buy and give to a friend as a gift, as if to say, you should do something about this, or because we try to be very, we don't talk except in whispers and then in also awful critical sentences about people's size in this land where we're all supposed to be, I think maybe size 12 at the largest for women. So it's one of those, well, certainly not backdoor kinds of things, but it's one of those things that we use euphemisms for all the time. So I love saying the word fat. I love saying the word old, just calling things by their real name. I'm going to read just a few chapters from this book, a couple easy ones and a couple not so easy ones. This first one is called Tucking in My Blouse. Today I am at home writing. I have done an amazing and wonderful thing for myself. I have spent the day with a t-shirt tucked into my jeans. Not hanging out, not carefully pulled over my stomach, not rolled up over, but tucked into my pants. No sweater or shirt covering up that indecent protrusion by hanging below my fat waist. You who have never been a fat woman will not understand. You who are more self-accepting about your size will scoff. You who are a good shopper will give me advice. You who are graduates of the Don't Make a Fuss school will be slightly annoyed. About noon, I noticed a role model in my head. It is my childhood best friend, who I last saw at our 45th high school reunion. A practical woman, matter of fact, full of humor, good cheer, and common sense, she evokes enormous admiration in me each time we've met as adults. She did so especially at the reunion barbecue, where she looked happy and stylish in Western jeans, boots, and a handsome white shirt tucked in. She even had a belt around her not thin waist. I think I wore something to hide my girth, probably slacks with a light sweater or t-shirt hanging out, wide enough at the bottom not to delineate my bulging stomach. Why can't you be like her, my extremely thin sister asks. She looked wonderful tonight. Well, I thought she did too, but it took enormous self-confidence and lots of chutzpah on her part, I thought, not to try to disguise her size. I must say, though, that I heard that weekend that same sister who advised me to accept myself commenting on people's size and appearance privately with her friends after a luncheon or the dinner or the brunch. Usually such comments were voiced about people my sister and her friends hadn't seen for a long time and were mostly voiced by thin women. Who do I think I'm kidding, going around in loose tops over slacks and skirts? Such outfits only make me look bigger, probably. I'm smaller in naked person than I look in any clothing I own. Perhaps that's true of all of us. When I cover my slightly expanded behind, much fuller bosom, and pregnant-looking stomach in some loose things, I do not look slender, or not fat, or thinner, or any of those ghastly goals we are socialized to approximate in our clothing. So here I am today, writing, occasionally emptying the dryer, eating lunch at my desk. I sort through some loose ends, but mostly write, happy and productive with my shirt tucked in, my fat stomach really obvious. It really doesn't look so bad, I tell myself, looking in the mirror at this unusual side of myself. In fact, I'm rather pleased that I look less fat than if I had a loose top hanging over these jeans, but only in my own eyes, I know. After all this work, I still think I see people looking at my fat self with disapproval. Junior high young people report searing self-consciousness as they turn away from the food line in the school cafeteria to find a table. I relived that adolescent feeling intensely in the cafeteria dining room at a treatment center for alcoholism in the fall of 1977. Again, I feel that same self-consciousness in these strange years of experiencing old age and a different body. I walk rapidly downtown as if to give others less time in which to determine my size. In the winter, under heavy coats, who can tell anyway? An exercise used in a treatment program focuses on freeing fat women from their reluctance to appear in public by assignments to do just that. The 51 women in that program became more revealing of their bodies in public. Reported in the New York Times, one woman preoccupied by the fatness around her neck, for example, started to wear her long hair pulled up rather than covering her neck. I might risk going about in public, obviously fat, in a belted dress or a shirt tucked into my skirt or a form-fitting dress or sweater. If I did this at least once a week, I could see if that behavior manifested cumulative ease about myself. What a risk. When I gained weight, I didn't ask anyone's advice about how to dress. Looser and bulkier, regular-sized things undoubtedly made up my wardrobe. But after I got over wondering why clerks in good dress stores looked at me unsmiling and said sharply they didn't have anything for me, I kept on covering up the fat, layering it with long tops over bottoms. I've never known that place below my waist where the top should end gracefully. I suspect I emphasize my stomach's furthest perimeter by wearing tops that stop right there. I'm too short to wear tunic tops, but I keep buying them to try anyway. American women, maybe just middle-class white women, grow up knowing how to look at themselves in mirrors, hoping to see less of themselves, hoping the dress they're trying on makes them look thin, slenderizes, as we say. My eyes are my mother's. We know all the tricks, we who are the other, the looked upon. I have read that black women in the United States diet less. That information surely connected to economics as well as culture. For an entire population of people imported across the Middle Passage and kept in tortuous slavery and then second-class citizenship, To be told to become less in order to meet some external criteria of acceptability must surely seem a bad joke, if not evidence of the insanity of the culture they live in. Today has been fun, so great to have my body back. I actually have my own body back when I can feel my stomach pressing against the waist of my pants. Imagine I have a waist, even if it's not one that is smaller than my bottom or my top. Who said a waist had to go in? Who said we are not supposed to feel good in shorts or bathing suits if we are fat? I keep thinking of the lack of self-consciousness on the part of my old childhood buddy. Could I be brave enough to do as she does, to stop the useless and idiotic attempts to cover up my fat, to try to look as if I weighed less than I do? Then perhaps I could adopt some of the traits of that person I so admire. She who is always glad to see me, cheerful, full of humor and good sense, and strong enough to accept the world as it is and not tear herself up fighting so much as I do. Actually, I think it's genetic. My old friend is herself, and I am myself too. But I'd like to have some of her ease with the world, her lack of cynicism, her gentleness with herself. Freedom may await me at our 50th high school reunion, where anyone who is still alive and able to travel and face social functions will have given up any judgment about what others look like, given up anything but laughing at our younger pretensions. The old bogeyman for women of the high school reunion will have faded away, leaving us at last to be only and wonderfully ourselves, grateful to be alive. This day of practice has certainly helped. I may do it again soon. But in front of others that I know are judging as they look, I don't know. Courage is what we all need to grow old in this country, to grow up into our real selves, all the fur rubbed off by then, our stomachs happy to be sticking out, no one telling us to hold them in. This business about art creating order out of the chaos of life, which is taken from a quote from May Sarton and other people, isn't something I would have said, because when I'm doing something I'm not aware of it. I mean, it's just natural for me to write my way through stuff. And I wrote my way through my sister Jane's death. And I wrote a long piece about my mother dying that I read when I was here the last time, about when I was here when Women and Aging came out. So it doesn't occur to me that what I'm doing is creating order. I'm simply taking what's going on and trying to put it into words. And sometimes that's ridiculous, because some experiences can't be encapsulated in words, but I sure try. Writing is cathartic for all of us. I mean, third graders doing poems, people writing in their journals. We have a writing group on Monday afternoons, and we do not intend for this to be a therapy group, but that's what ends up happening for people as they write their way through just some subject that may not sound like it's got any relevance to where people are. My favorite one was that years ago, one time we wrote on teeth. We choose these subjects, and every single person in the room wrote something different, and it reflected part of their own personality and what they were going through at the time. Teeth, mind you. So it's, you know, anything can be the hook on which we pull out the stuff that's going on in us. Women are devastated in our culture by being prisoners of an irrational, narrow, ever-changing, random definition of what is physically attractive. And we are encouraged to spend a great deal of money, time, and energy on what we look like to somebody else, not on who we are or what we're happy looking like. You know, we come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And I think particularly in the culture in the United States, it's devastating to women, to our self-esteem, to our sense of getting on with our lives, that we get to obsess about what we weigh. So this book is a bit of a rant, but it's full of suggestions. It's full of lists of the good work. There's beginning to be a lot of really good work. In the last 2 years, some good books have come out on the subject of women and appearance. Not books that say, well, not books that are, you know, the camel under the tent of, now this is how you can be healthy, or this is how you can live a happier life, lose 10 pounds. you know, there's a lot of that around. But there are some good books that we need to just be brave enough to say, this is who I am. The numbers on the scale do not define me. And it's real uphill. That's swimming upstream in our culture. This is one of the harder ones. It's called The Birds. I mean, that was an easy one. The little birds came flocking across the country club driveway, flocking in their tiny glittery cocktail suits, their white stockings, their little low-heeled shoes, accompanied by their suited partners. I felt like a butterfly pinned to the wall, caught by this flock of perfectly, properly dressed women, flooding from cars driven by their husbands to the private club for the wedding reception of the daughter of an equally fashionable couple. They fluttered, they smiled their charming smiles, they walked erect, sure of their plumage. Proper little birds always. My husband and I and another couple were leaving the club after an early supper, unaware that we would cross the path of this social migration. Lots of old college friends and acquaintances who now live out of town were back for this wedding reunion, and my lawyer-politician husband, whose establishment credentials are untarnished, greeted many of them with ease, fraternity brothers among them. The four of us were an island, an eddy in the river, the birds and their partners swirling around us. A powerful searchlight of shame remembers for me only that I visited with a tall, handsome couple, she rail-thin like all the other women, he as sturdy and wryly quiet as he was 40 years ago. They'd been ranchers since they left the university, successful ones by the look of them. He stood there silently, looking at me the whole time. Was he trying to remember who this was standing beside the man he remembered? Was he thinking, my God, she's gotten fat? Or was he just biding his time until the conversation stopped and he and his wife could move on to the reception? Not a word came from him, only the long looks I interpreted as puzzled. I can't remember, but I suspect the little birds talked in chirpy tones, as women do in public. Maybe especially in the presence of men. Maybe under the stress of having to be charming. Who knows? It's kind of a, hi there, chirp. Cheery, smiley, pleasant, certifiable good girl behavior. A perfect portrait of the little bird watching the men talk, smiling, listening, making unobtrusive, appreciative comments, moving her head from one to the other, was captured for me at a meeting of law firms my husband belongs to. From across the room, I watched a woman I had loved talking to earlier in that day stand at tiny attention, feet properly together between her husband and another man, being a perfect auxiliary, supportive, pleasant, attentive to the men. At that biennial conference, it was easy to tell wives from the women attorneys. Wives were heavier, less fashionably dressed, except for the occasional bird, older, and tended to listen rather than talk around the men. In that flood of the wedding reception, college reunion, birds and their mates, I never felt fatter, worse dressed, or more socially out of place. Earlier, I'd put on some dress I consider nice for the occasion of an informal dinner at that dress-up place, although the summery material billowed, and I suspected my husband thought it made me look fatter than I am. Since I only wear Birkenstock shoes, flat, wide, sensible, and comfortable, I didn't even have on little heels to give me a slightly fashionable look below my nearly ankle-length dress. All my dresses are slightly billowy and long. I do not fit into nor qualify for the birds who wear cocktail suits that end right above or right below the knee, little suits that are cut straight for the bird-like figures. De rigueur white stockings make their bird-like legs look like a flock stepping along together. Here I am attacking my sisters out of my ridiculous insecurities that old and fat I no longer belong to their club. When I did belong, I didn't think of it, the insouciance of the insider. I know that I make a scapegoat of being old and heavy to avoid insecurities that I have carried for a lifetime. That's one of the truths that can make me free once I emotionally get hold of it. Face the insecurities, not rail about our appearance-obsessed culture, and quit judging on appearance too. Still, I cringe at the sight of the little bird, these flocks of women who exemplify the sarcastic words that Annie Lennox sings, Keep young and beautiful, so you'll be loved. They are thin, fashionably dressed, adorned with good jewelry, their gray hair dyed or brushed with blonde streaks or coiffed into fashionable styles, socially adept, more often than not extroverted, married to a man successful in his profession. They still maintain establishment credentials as camouflage. Last fall, the Omaha World-Herald published 2 full newspaper pages of people attending the annual social ritual of the Exarban Ball. Naturally, all the people pictured were prominent socially, which means money, then power, then old family. The makers of the women's gowns were mentioned, since this affair requires the women to purchase the most fashionable evening dress they can find. Afford is probably not an issue. What I noticed is that all the women were rail thin, all looking chic in what I guess were size 4 or 6 gowns, maybe 8 or 10. Do no large women attend out of 500 ball goers? Did any heavy women refuse to be photographed? Or did the Omaha World-Herald photographers not select anyone who didn't look especially good, that is, not fat? Photographers may be a especially prejudiced lot, I remember, still with some pain. The man photographing our family of 5 at the reflecting pool on the Mall in Washington, D.C. for our biennial portrait to send to my husband's constituents. That year, I was fat and confused about my life, acting out in awkward, strange ways. Yet I knew no other way to behave than to keep up the front. In this case, have our picture taken to be reproduced on thousands of postcards. As the photographer arranged us, he suggested that one of the girls sit in front of me, and he said, to hide her fat. I winced, not realizing until then that my size needed to be disguised, not realizing he'd been trying to make me look better, and deeply embarrassed to be singled out, to be partially hidden. Size is very often a class issue. Lower class women don't have the time or money to spend on diets, exercise, new clothes, fancy hairdos, or makeup to make one look young and slim. Exarban and the wedding reception at the country club are made up of upper class and upper middle class, almost entirely white people. Occasionally a black business person and or an East Indian doctor may apply. When we were in France at my husband's Rotary convention 2 summers ago, I longed for a glimpse of my stereotype of a European peasant woman, large, hard-working, earthy, real. I bet they don't greet the flu with happy thoughts of losing a few pounds for the suffering. I used to, until one of the counselors at Weight Watchers told me that pounds lost while you're sick return quickly. Possibly she didn't know that Weight Watchers pounds lost return in full and more, but not if you keep coming and paying to Weight Watchers. 33, now it's $36 billion a year is the latest estimate of what people spend in the weight loss industry in the United States. As Jean Kilbourne says in her latest hard-hitting video, Slim Hopes, Advertising and the Obsession with Thinness, there's big profit to be made from making women feel bad about themselves. I am no longer a consumer of the diet and weight loss industry. Some days I spend not 1 minute lamenting my lost size 10. I'm beginning to thank my heavy body for its health and strength, its holding of me through life. Yet caught in the flock of birds, the women who know how to be loved and admired, although willing captives in the women's prison of who you are is what you look like, your value determined by somebody else, I felt bad about myself in comparison. Who am I in my heavy body, my long skirts, my unfashionable clothing, my unfashionable everything self? Who am I outside the bounds set for me by the patriarchy, by all of our culture? Someone who has to criticize other women in order to feel okay about myself? I hope not, yet I still do. Part of who I am is my appearance, old, heavy, white-haired, and worthy, even surrounded by flocks of the fashionable birds. I love hearing the crows from up high in the trees, cawing, restless, flying high, said in an ancient legend to carry the souls of the old women. I didn't grow up in the country where crows are considered pests. Hearing them settles me, calls me to some flock beyond the little birds, to both flocks of and solitary crows who live on the margins of the birds we favor, loud and outside our rules for nice, pretty songbirds. So the book is a Well, it's part of the whole process. Diets don't work. Diets make you gain more weight. I mean, that's really thoroughly substantiated these days. And yet we're surrounded by a $36 billion diet industry alone in our country. The point is to make women feel bad about themselves so they'll buy something. And the $36 billion does not include gyms and exercise equipment and exercise clothing. And this is $36 billion diet industry alone for something that not only doesn't work, but makes people gain more weight back. So I wrote about my own experience with Weight Watchers. I wrote about my own experience with having a dreadful time covering up the fat. Besides listing the good stuff that people can take advantage of, all the things we do in a 6-week class series where we work very hard to try to not be obsessed by our appearance. It's very hard work. It's so uphill. All that's in the book. Lots and lots of stories. Lots of my reaction to how we are saturated by the media with things that tell us that we're all too fat and that that's wrong. Now, you know, I really thought what was wrong in the world were wars and hunger and torture and homelessness. And I think those are the things we need to pay attention to, not to what somebody else says we look like. So now I really do a job on Weight Watchers. But that just happens to have been my experience. I think, you know, this is big business, the $36 billion in the national economy that is on weight loss alone, on diets. You know, I always liked all those women, all those people there. They're not the issue. This is Weight Watchers, How They Want Us Back. And all I did was get a flyer in the mail, and off I go. In the past year, I received in the mail a Weight Watchers pamphlet exhorting me to come back. I had been a dutiful attender of Weight Watcher meetings for several months a few years back, winning a weight loss award, and still not liking my size at 131 pounds. After that came the final weight gain. Well, Weight Watchers is still after the backsliders, people who no longer show up on their membership rolls, with the zeal of the missionary. Their advertising come-ons, however, are more overtly sexual than those of people selling religious salvation. Weight Watchers is selling salvation by looks, not by good deeds, except as we in this country consider losing weight an especially good deed, and with our great faith in its promises. The woman seated on the back cover of this latest brochure is tan, thin, young, seated on top of a white stucco structure wall, head to the sky, one hand to the throat, the other concealed in her lap by her flouncy white dress, her right nipple showing through the thin summery material, her back arched. This woman is having an orgasm. And wouldn't you if you had just lost weight? Losing weight means you can have multiple frequent orgasms because you will attract the man of your dreams. You can also be tan because you'll be living in some glamorous vacation place and will wear a little white dress that shows off your tan, your thick brunette hair, and your breasts. Leading up to this orgasm of appearance making everything better is an early strategy in this Weight Watchers solicitation in the mail. So when's your baby due? An innocent stranger asked me as I was watering my garden. I thought I would die. I wasn't pregnant. I was overweight. Tell me. There is no consideration of the rudeness of strangers, only the unstated cultural rule that comments on people's fat are considered appropriate, even to our face and certainly within our hearing. Nor is any attack considered too mean to turn into that great old line, what did I do to deserve this? What did I do wrong? What can I do different so they'll like me? I remember the shame of that same experience of people thinking I was pregnant. I guess I've always had a stomach waiting to pop out. In those days before menopause, I knew I had done something wrong, actually committing a sin by becoming so heavy that I embarrassed my friends when they beamed at me, "Oh, you're pregnant." I know about that. As I described in the first chapter, when I was obviously an old woman, a male acquaintance patted my stomach and said, "On the nest again, are we?" So such comments are not restricted to women able to bear children. The second come on by Weight Watchers says, "Make the decision that can change your life forever, Ruth. Losing weight is to offer everything in our culture." With Weight Watchers on your side, Ruth, anything is possible. Technology allows them to design a booklet with my name conveniently and frequently inserted, making me understand that the issue is me. On a further page of this slick paper, several colors of ink, oversized brochure, is a photograph of a darling young woman in a little black dress, holding a bouquet of roses, arm around her loving Hunk's white-coated, open-shirt body, her head coyly resting on his shoulder, both grinning to beat the band. Weight Watchers tells me, there's big news in Lincoln, Nebraska. Now, Weight Watchers has even more of what you need to succeed. More personal attention, more care, more flexible choices. So Weight Watchers suit your lifestyle even more, Ruth. You owe it to yourself to come back today. The facing page shows a woman playing football with two young boys shouting, "This time I'll have the energy to keep up with my kids." It's as if fat women do not play with their kids, have no energy, do not attract men, look like they're pregnant, have low self-esteem, have let themselves go, and cannot wear attractive clothes. Going on, Weight Watchers quotes a tiny woman cavorting in the tide on a beach. "This time I'm going to feel good in my own skin." Yes, by having less for my skin to cover, by reducing the space that I take up in this world. God forbid that we should consider feeling good in our skin because we are healthy, active, sane, productive, creative, loving, thoughtful women. Before and after photographs and incredibly shiny, colorful, mouth-watering pictures of food are leading illustrations in this sales pitch. You can buy the Weight Watchers food plan, video, guidebook, magazine, body tube exerciser, walking belt, squeeze bottle, complete exercise book, food companion, fast food companion, family dining companion, fat and fiber selection trackers, whatever they are, activity plan, and special savings coupons, all for 3 payments of $36.65 plus $8.95 shipping and handling. This Weight Watchers at Home package is pitched to women who are actually too embarrassed to attend a meeting. Her self-esteem had ebbed to the point where she actually convinced herself she could not return to the meeting room. Self-shunning indeed. After losing 52 pounds, Patty came back and became a meeting leader so she could share her phenomenal experience with others. This $109.95 plus shipping and handling does not include buying the Weight Watchers food so artfully shown in the pages, the description of which includes such evocative words as international selections, form a healthy relationship with pleasure, luscious, exotic world flavors, something you can really get passionate about. There we are, we're working up to those orgasms again, sex through food. The next to last page is the killer pitch for Weight Watchers frozen desserts. Deny yourself nothing. Life is short. It should be sweet. How can you resist? Enjoy guilt-free with gusto. So if you think losing weight and being wonderful is about denial or limits or boredom or even the goddesses forbid starvation, think again. You can have it all. The final before and after photographs on the inside back cover show a fat woman with pale skin sitting on the grass, her legs apart, a loose t-shirt on top, smiling. And that same woman, after losing 105 pounds, standing fashionably posed, wearing a sharp red blouse, tan trousers, and black pumps, beaming. I went all the way with Weight Watchers. This time you can too. Well, all the way is an old phrase meaning going beyond petting or making out to having sexual intercourse. Weight Watchers is not kidding. Every word is carefully chosen to lead you to the ultimate orgasm provided for only $9 per session, plus Weight Watchers guarantee of new sessions, new food plan, more personal service, and what? Weight loss, men, unbridled happiness, a wonderful life, great sex, a good job, adoring and constant attention, a nice home, deep sleep, adoration of your children, vacations of your dreams, fame and fortune. Weight loss for women is offered as the road to all of the above, even in what I love to call the gathering dark, from Tony Kushner's epilogue to Angels in America. In the gathering dark of this world of greed, war, environmental destruction, and the growing chasm between the rich and the poor. Tony Kushner writes in that epilogue, "Together we organize the world for ourselves, or at least we organize our understanding of it. We reflect it, refract it, criticize it, grieve over its savagery, and we help each other to discern, amidst the gathering dark, paths of resistance, pockets of peace, and places from whence hope may be plausibly expected." From Kushner's words, coming at the end of 2 awesome evenings of theater, a gay fantasia on national themes, AIDS in America and the lives of gay men, I take hope. As we live amidst the gathering dark, I reject the seductions of a Weight Watchers brochure that begs me to come back to being an object of approval from people whose values I decry. I need all my strength and spirit to find those paths of resistance, pockets of peace, and places from whence hope may be plausibly expected. Don't you love Tony Kushner for those words? I have some very vague memories. In high school, reading Eric Severide's Not So Wild a Dream, i.e. some kind of democratic behavior and construction is not so wild a dream, and was very moved by that and tried to address that in a book review I had to do for some civics class. But for myself, there has been very little sense of the power of my written word, because I write exactly the same way I talk, and I use the vernacular, and I'm not an academic with lots of degrees and lots of footnotes in my work. So if there is any power in anyone's written word, I think, it's when it resonates in somebody else's life, and then something makes sense for them or makes them feel that they're not alone. That's the kind of writing I do. So I don't have much sense of the power of that, except as the written word makes its own way to whomever it's supposed to reach. I have had lots of feedback from people about my books. They've said, thank you for writing what you did. But the other issue with that is that I do lots of workshops and give lots of talks on women and aging and women weight and appearance issues. So it may be difficult for people to separate reading the book and being helped or coming to a workshop or hearing a talk. Not 20 minutes ago, I heard somebody say to me that for their father to read through Women and Aging helped him understand his aging partner. Now that is just, in fact, she used the words, it helped him make sense of it. And that's just been one of the practically guiding lights of my life, is that something has to make sense. So it was the perfect response. I think it's wonderful that we have this marvelous library and the Heritage Room. And the Ames reading series, I have no idea how long it's gone on or how many authors have come and spoken here, or how long you've been videotaping it, so for a wider audience. But I don't think there's anything richer than people gathered to listen to somebody read. I mean, I was connected with the Gathering Place for a long time. And for about 6 or 7 of those years, I arranged a program every Monday noon of authors and writers, or people talking about their favorite author or writer. Sometimes people reading. We always had Ted Kooser. We always had Clefcorn. People were so gracious and willing to come talk about their work for 45 minutes for free. And I think that's a very rich tradition that we would be so much the poorer if we did not have. Do it just right. I mean, that's the only, it's the only thing writers can do is write. And, look at your life so you can make a clearing in which you can write, in which you're not interrupted, in which you're not criticized, in which you're encouraged and supported by other writers. That's what these writing groups are for. Our Monday afternoon group is open. You know, people can come 1:30 to 3:30 over at First Plymouth. People can take courses in Lincoln. Oh, you can take everything you want. Just keep writing. Now, back to something a little easier. And then I'll be done and we can talk or share thoughts. This is called Love Letters. I keep my car radio tuned to stations that play jazz. That ordinary nurturing routine became a serendipitous correspondence, an opening into another world one spring, in which I heard old jazz musician, I bet I can call him old, and orchestra leader Preston Love criticize Della Reese for being obese on his program on KIOS-FM Omaha. Outraged that singer Della Reese was not honored by fellow jazz musician Preston Love for her talent and success, I continued to hear him define her as letting herself go and just eating too much. Love explained that he had just started his 10-week diet and the only reason for weighing too much was overeating. My fury increased as I wrote to the radio station. The male gaze is vicious and perpetuates a demeaning and cruel falsehood that we are who we look like to them onto the lives of women. I would hope your artist would not participate in such calumny? Is that the word? Calumny. Not surprisingly, Preston Love, an African-American man long renowned in musical circles and especially in Nebraska for being from here, wrote back to advise me to listen to his response the next week. And he said further, no, Della Reese is not attractive as she is now. And this is said unanimously by all those who know her, including her colleagues. Of course they say it privately, but why not publicly? This does not imply any attack on her. Yet all who read your letter regard yours as an attack on me. I regard yours as the calumny in this situation. And please, for God's sake, don't try to inject the male, female, or gender thing into this. It has no application here. I would say the same thing about her overeating and her physical appearance if I was a female, or conversely if she was a male. There's nothing wrong with keeping oneself reasonably attractive and in good physical condition, or at least reasonably so. I met Della Reese in San Antonio, Texas in 1957. She was then a fine physical specimen, and she is a travesty of that as she appears today. Of course, I had not the slightest interest in her as the male chauvinist you imply all men are, but I do have good vision. I expressed an opinion on Love Notes, his radio program, that I will continue to have without the slightest intent to demean or ridicule her. He concluded with, regards to your husband, of whom I have always been a big fan and supporter. I got the message. There was one person in your family I like. Recognizing that raising consciousness will not happen while I'm making somebody mad, and grateful that he cared enough to answer my letter, I wrote back to Preston Love. The trouble with keeping oneself reasonably attractive and in good physical condition is that who gets to define those terms? Our culture has an ever-changing, very narrow window of what is attractive for women. There were times when voluptuous women were considered the most attractive, and in good physical condition is pretty subjective. Charlie minds his own diabetes, and I mind my own high cholesterol, and we try not to judge each other's efforts to maintain our health as best we can. I suspect that lots of people don't consider people with physical disabilities attractive, which is pretty hard on and unfair to such people. The whole point of the powerful story Elephant Man is that a deformed body housed a beautiful person, but only a very few people could see that. However, how can you say what you do about Della Reese and at the same time say you have no intent to demean nor ridicule her? If calling her not attractive does not imply any attack on her, what do you call it? She might feel differently about that if you were to say such things directly to her. And do you think that speaking publicly about your idea of Della Reese as travesty is any better than colleagues speaking thus privately? What justifies our criticism of one another? Thanks for writing back. Maybe we can learn from each other. P.S. I think of Mahalia Jackson, Ella Fitzgerald, and Rosemary Clooney, great singers all, and wonder if their weight enters into your opinion of the splendid women they are. Preston Love and I wrote to each other one more time. He did not choose to continue this dialogue after my last letter. Perhaps having such a demanding pen pal was not possible for his life. Perhaps he felt we had come to some understanding, or not, and could let it go at that. I am genuinely grateful for our dialogue by letter. Preston's last letter offered this. Apparently, the somewhat difference of our philosophies is the cause for your misunderstanding of my motive in making the comments about a woman's physique. My statement was spontaneous and hardly malicious, but meant mainly as a comparison between the person I first saw in '57 and the person whom I see on television and in magazines now. The standards of beauty and attractiveness are pretty well defined, which has nothing to do with their intrinsic qualities. Even the definition of beauty can be very subjective and personal. Naturally, we can't hold a person responsible for physical deterioration or changes brought about by age, pathological illnesses, or accidents, but neglect of one's anatomy, such as overeating and failure to get proper exercise, can be remedied easily enough. In Ella's case, her debilitating illness has nearly destroyed her once healthy physique. I don't think Rosemary Clooney's appearance was enhanced by her great weight gains. And in the case of Mahalia, I never knew her to look any different from her last years. Every person alive is going to have opinions and reflections about everything we observe in life, and I won't promise that I will never make a casual or spontaneous remark about things or people. Only yesterday, a racetrack associate said to me, "Well, Preston, I hear you will be 74 years old on April 26th. You are no longer young and handsome." He went on to kid me about my advanced age and my increased weight, all of which I found very true and humorous. I was not in the least offended, but should curb my enormous penchant for sweets and other goodies. As for Della, maybe her physical changes, and this is still Preston talking, are a blessing in disguise or an asset, since her career really took off in recent years. Hollywood has long been known for seeing all black women as another Aunt Jemima or Hattie McDaniels. Maybe the Hollywood of that day would have found it impossible to cast McDaniels in Gone with the Wind and Louise Beavers in any other roles except the stereotypes of the day. Both were excellent actresses. This wasn't limited just to our female blacks. Look back to those movies of the time and how they portrayed the black man, same as with the females. How demeaning. I wrote back to Preston. I would be offended if a friend said, "Well, Ruth, you are no longer young and pretty." Frankly, I cannot imagine being comfortable hearing somebody kid me about my advanced age and my increased weight. That's a critical statement, whether meant for a man or a woman. Maybe it was just teasing. Obviously, neither of us is young, but handsome is so subjective. And the struggles of age and a changing body shape are difficult enough without somebody making fun of us. Does that mean they are perfect according to our culture's standards? How do we justify that someone's appearance is no longer pleasing to me? In the conclusion to her Ageism and the Politics of Beauty, Cynthia Rich writes, after discussing photographs of Septima Clark and Georgia O'Keeffe when they were old women, our task is to learn not to look insultingly beyond these features to a soul we can celebrate, but instead of take in these bodies as part of these souls, exciting, individual, beautiful. After quoting that passage to Preston Love, I wrote, weight gain and loss in body shape and size are determined by genes and metabolism. Dieting causes one to gain more weight. Chronic dieting causes more health problems than fat. Fat people and thin people eat pretty much the same. Fat is not necessarily unhealthy, and fat people can and do lead healthy and productive lives, even joyous lives, except for the prejudice against their appearance from others. I concluded, thank you for educating me about how perhaps Della Reese's career may have been elevated by her weight gain, since Hollywood and our culture may want black women to fit the Aunt Jemima stereotype, and also for your remarks about how demeaning is the portrayal of the black man in many aspects of our culture. You have experienced much of what I have yet to learn and understand and be aware of. Thanks for trusting that I am able to become more conscious. I am glad for this encounter. glad for even the misunderstandings between Preston and myself, and especially grateful that we can communicate across our differences, more able thus to celebrate them and come to know each other. There we are.